sacred rituals, and a cosmic community to enchant your mystical life. This podcast feels like soulful conversations by the fire and under the desert stars, as if you are hanging with your best friends, talking about purpose, the cosmos, and the divine journey we are all on. My name is Anna Alich, and this is the Topanga Moon Podcast. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. This is the Topanga Moon Podcast. If you're new, so happy you're stopping by. So excited that you're stopping in for this episode in particular because it's going to be incredible. And I'm so happy and excited and can't be more thrilled for this topic and this information for all of you to hear. It's really, really essential. But yeah, how's everyone doing? I am living my snowy cabin life. Just really embracing winter, going on nature walks, skating outside on the lake, seeing so many animals. I mean, I don't remember the last time I saw so many animals in the wintertime, but I guess it's because I've been spending so much time out in the wilderness in a cabin at the moment, and it's been really beautiful and rejuvenating, and this true connection to the natural rhythms of the land. And I'm so grateful that I get to be here right now. So today's episode, wow, and I say wow a lot in this conversation. It is profound. It is beyond amazing. I'm so truly honored to have water educator, advocate Isabel Friend on the podcast today. Her work is transformational and already making a huge impact on my life and my creative work, as I know she has for so many other people. And we get into so much today on this beautiful topic of water. We discuss the mystical, the magical, the otherworldly, the scientific, the imperative, and life-giving qualities of water. Water is so important, and it is our lifeblood. And that is truly seen throughout this whole interview. I was led to Isabel's work and just so amazed by her mission and water advocacy. And this episode is just filled with information that will not only transform your health, but really explain how we can transform the health of our planet. And I really think that there is no cause that connects us more intricately and is more important to us in this moment than the advocacy of clean water, of drinking beautiful, structured water, and allowing water to be classified and known as life, because water is life. Isabel's website is filled with so much information and goodness. Just go check it out. It's waterislife.love. And she has some beautiful courses out, and she is even generously offering the Topanga Moon community a 20% discount on her course, Navigating the Waters, with the code Topanga Moon at checkout. And I'll leave all of this in the description below. Wow, there's just so much to get into. I can't wait for you to really fall in love with water. So let's dive into this episode and really embrace the science and mysticism that truly belong together when it comes to the mysterious and magical world of water with Isabel Friend. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to bring on Isabel Friend to the Topanga Moon Podcast. She is a water educator and advocate working and doing the research in this field that is so important, so vital to us. And really, I would say
you bring this beautiful balance of science and mysticism when it comes to the importance of water as our lifeblood, and all the work that you do, your courses, your website, your articles are so incredible in teaching and educating people all over the world. So thank you. I'm so honored for you to be on this podcast with me.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yes, it's going to be a beautiful conversation. I know it. Would love to start from kind of the beginning and hear a little bit about your journey and how you became a water educator and an advocate. For me, I always think of, we have these little breadcrumbs when we're going along in our spiritual journey, or we're going along just in our life, that are these moments of just aligning to our path and aligning to our dharma. So I would love to hear how you got into this field and what really ignited your work in this incredible and so important, field of work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I think it sort of started for me back in 2009. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and I was a nutritionist and a health coach. So I was really working with clients on finding what is the healthiest food that we can eat. And I was kind of obsessed at the time with human optimization, and just recognizing that as humans, we have this untapped, nearly infinite capacity and just incredible capabilities, but we're barely scratching the surface of our human potential. And the time I really thought that it was through food that we could shift our way of being, because you are what you eat, right? But over time, I started to realize that because we're 70% water by volume and 99.9+% water molecularly, that the water we drink is actually far more important than the food that we eat. And in fact, if our water isn't dialed in, we don't even absorb the nutrients from the food that we eat, and they can't get put to use in our body at all, because water mediates every single function, every single process in the body. So I started looking into foraging raw wild water. I was really into foraging and wildcrafting raw wild food, not necessarily raw foods, but wild food. And when I started drinking wild water, that was really when everything sort of shifted for me. And I ended up discovering the work of Victor Schauberger, who is just an incredible water wizard from the late 1800s. And in diving into the rabbit holes of his profound work, I recognized that water really carries the solutions to all of humanity's toughest questions, whether we're talking about economic or sociological or ecological or biological, all of the conundrums that we've gotten ourselves into. Water is life. And so for those areas of our lives to thrive, we need to turn to the wisdom of water. And that was really life-changing for me to recognize that. But it was definitely a process. Like I said, it's been 11 years of studying. And I started teaching about 6 years ago, actually just to get free tickets to festivals. Just teaching workshops at festivals. And then the response was amazing. People were really loving it. And I was really loving teaching as well. But it didn't really click for me until I think 2018. 17 or 18 was my first moon dance. I went down to Teotihuacan in Mexico and really committed to that path and walking the red road. And part of my prayer during the first dance was, please show me my mission, show me my path, and, really calling in a vision. And even though I had been obsessed with water, it was always like my geeky little hobby until that ceremony. You're praying and fasting and not sleeping and dancing for 4 days with these abuelas in this ancient Mexico way, and it just came through so clearly, like, just focus on water, and that's it. And at the time I had no idea what that would look like. I was hoping for more like career advice, and I didn't know anyone who was looking at career water. I had no idea how it would work, but I knew that spirit would show up and the way would unfold, and it has in such a profound way. That's kind of my journey with it.
It's incredible when I find, and I've heard people's stories of when they really tap into that Dharma and really the soul mission. And I love speaking about this and reading about this, connecting to that part of you that knows the way and knows why you came here. And for you to get that information that it had to do with water and just trusting it and going, moment by moment and allowing the journey to unfold in front of you and really just trusting the universe and trusting source, and the source being water in itself, which is so profound and amazing to have that connection. And I also think it's interesting. I've been dabbling in the wellness industry for a while now, but I haven't come across, at least from what my research, many people who are really talking specifically about water. And it might be because, and this is just what I'm thinking, it's like when we don't have to worry about our water source, it is just kind of there for us. It's not at the forefront of our minds when we're thinking. And just like you were talking about being a nutritionist and looking at, food and food being the source of our health, but we don't really think about water. So I think it's so incredible that you really made that connection. And through the work that I've seen of you, and I've dove deep into your work and I'm still learning so much. It's so incredible. I'm really coming to understand the magic and the mystery of water and how important it is for all of us. So could you get into some of the importance of water, and in terms of it, of structured water versus, I believe you call it bulk water, and how water is a living liquid crystal?
Yeah, that's a really great place to start. And I think you
Yeah.
make a really good point that, for those of us who are living in water-rich areas of the world, largely those of us
Yeah.
who are in the global north, water is just so sort of ubiquitous that we assume it's really simple and we don't really give it much thought. We know, oh yeah, I should drink 8 glasses a day. But I think because water is so good at subtlety and keeping her mysteries to herself, that she seems incredibly simple. And because the various phases of liquid water, like you mentioned, structured water versus bulk water, those are actually 2 completely different phases of water. And because they both look like clear liquid either way, we just assume that all water is the same, whether it's mineral water or alkaline water or reverse osmosis or distilled. Even though our bodies can tell a big difference, our eyes can't. And unless you are really attuned to the subtleties, a lot of times people's palates can't necessarily distinguish between those different waters either. Over time, of course, you can develop that. Those subtle distinctions in your palate. But I think that's why we kind of overlook it so often. But just from a scientific perspective, water is far from simple. It's far, far from this, simple, common, ubiquitous object that we think that it is. In fact, there are over 63 anomalies about water, ways that it behaves, that scientists just have no way of understanding. It just defies the laws of physics and defies the way that any other substance would behave. But as we start to kind of understand its odd behavior and these strange anomalies and these ways that it's unlike anything else, we're realizing that one of the reasons why its properties had eluded scientists for so long was because for a long time, science tends to have this reductivist approach, right?
Yeah.
Like let's get down to the smallest isolated sort of reductionist view of things, and the more we refine down, maybe the more we'll understand something. And that's not really how it works with life in general, or especially with water. If we're looking at water molecules singularly, that's like trying to study one human being and understand humanity as a whole. But like humanity, Water is a community of individuals, these individual molecules that interlock and interweave together in molecular patterns and structures that give them unique social behaviors, sort of like the way humans come together in various what we call cultures. You know, these cultures have specific patterns, they have a specific resonance, and they have specific behaviors, and water is exactly the same. You know, we are just scaled up versions of water after all. And so the way that the molecules come together is everything. And that's really the difference between bulk and structured water. So when the molecules congregate in a certain way, it's this fourth phase beyond solid or liquid or gas. Sometimes it's called structured water or exclusion zone water or crystalline water or biological water, bio water. Basically, any researcher that you look into is going to have a different name for it. A lot of ancient indigenous cultures referred to it as living water. You can see references to living water versus dead water in a lot of different scriptures from various religions. But at this point, it's no longer H2O, right? At this point, it's H3O2, trihydrogen dioxide. And this is really different from the bulk water that we're all accustomed to, that we've all been drinking for most of our lives, where the molecules are unstructured, they're random, they're disconnected, they can't communicate with each other, they can't transfer information because there's all of these random hydrogen bonds forming and breaking apart billions of times per second. But if we go back to that community analogy, you know, we know that for any good relationship, there's got to be good communication, right? And the foundation of any culture is good relationships amongst the people and the families. And so for water to transmit information, to communicate, to form good relationships and strong bonds, those molecules need to stay in closer connection. And there are lots of different ways for them to snuggle up and bond, you know, like covalent bonds, van der Waals bonds, and some other hypothetical bonds that may account for some of water's strange anomalies. But basically, water uses all of these different tools of connection, just like different relationships that we form, you know, romantic relationships, friendships, familial relationships. It uses these tools to sort of create these really intricate and really unique crystalline structures. I'm assuming with your demographic on this podcast, probably most people have seen the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto and the various crystals that water forms. And so the different intricate patterns of those crystals are as a result of these different molecular bonds that form. Basically, the molecules are just irresistibly attracted to each other, and they have this constant movement. It's never static. They're always in this lovemaking dance and forming these artistic sacred geometries. And when it's in this crystalline structure, it transforms from a random dead liquid into a sentient and sensitive being. Sentient and sensitive, because water is dipolar, right? Meaning it has two poles, it has a positive and a negative side. It has masculine and feminine atoms. And it's only because the feminine hydrogen and the masculine oxygen are so attracted to one another, only because they love each other so much, they form this sacred union, that all of life is possible. So really the difference between bulk liquid and crystal water is it behaves with this principle called quantum coherence. And quantum coherence, quantum means faster than the speed of light, means instantaneous. And coherence means it can act all together as one unit. So like, for example, if you have 1,000 threads, they're all random, but if you weave them together in a certain way, then the fabric acts with coherence, with cohesively as one unit. So structured crystalline water behaves with quantum coherence, which allows it to communicate over really vast distances instantaneously, right? Faster than the speed of light. Like your body, right? You are all these cells and organs and nerve fibers, but your body is coherent in that it feels all like one unit, one single body, right? So when your water is structured, it's able to act as one cohesive body as well. And all of the water in your body, one of the reasons why we call this, why we call crystalline water, we sometimes call it bio water, biological water, is because all the water in your body, in the body of every living being, is structured to some degree. In fact, it's this coherent crystalline phase that bestows life, that allows life. Bulk water cannot transmit the signals of life. Only crystalline water can. So this is how your body so intelligently knows how to fold proteins and how to read DNA and how to replicate cells and digest food and deliver nerve signals and just all the innumerable imperceptible little miracles that it performs every nanosecond. It's able to do all of this because the water that it's comprised of is literally an intelligent entity. It's in a formation, and so it stores information. Like, you are literally a living liquid crystal. And I think it's important to maybe just distinguish real quick exactly what a crystal is, because, especially in the New Age communities, we have a lot of assumptions about crystals. But basically, a crystal is just anything whose molecular arrangement is in an organized and repeating pattern. So you can think of carbon, for example. Like, when carbon is unstructured, like bulk water is unstructured, it forms coal. And when it's slightly more structured, it forms graphite, but it's still just carbon. And when it's highly organized, like crystalline fourth phase water is highly organized, then it becomes a diamond. Right? Now, it's still just carbon, just pure carbon in all of these forms. The only difference is the molecular arrangement. And we are made of the water equivalent of diamonds. But our whole healthcare system and our whole primitive understanding of hydration really treats the human body like it's made of the water equivalent of coal. And it's really a shame, because I think it's this distinction that opens up this whole world of hydrobiophysics and really opens up new patterns of health and wellness. And I think maybe the easiest way to conceptualize of this difference is, again, through the terminology that countless indigenous tribes and ancient spiritual traditions use, and they call it the difference between living water and dead water. And it's just so beautiful that these ancient insights about water as the body of life, as the body of consciousness, are now being echoed in laboratories, because sadly the Western mind needs that affirmation. We've all heard that water is life, and it's very true, but only living water is life, because dead water actually dehydrates, and your hydration is directly proportional to your life force.
And so many people don't know that distinction, and this feels like it's a miraculous secret or something. Like, we have this beautiful resource that could heal ourselves and heal the planet all at the same time. Yet there's so many people that don't know the distinction, the type of water that they're taking in, and so many other things that we're going to get into. And I just love the comparison that you made of it being a community, because if you think of a community, that's where your health thrives, when you're in commune with other people. When you're isolated from the community, that's where, disease and sickness can really run rampant. And we see this so much. And I think that we're seeing this on a global scale. So that comparison is so beautiful. And it's just so, incredible to me to think of just something as simple as we think of as water being so much more than it is, and so miraculous in so many ways, and truly what makes up life and what can give us so much life. So I love that you've described all of this in this way, and it's just kind of blew my mind when I was reading all of this, because it's something that, once again, a remembrance, because I think we know this in our bodies, but when we're hearing it, and especially in the time that we're in, it really feels like we're in this place of going back to how is nature's created beautifully and perfectly, and going back to those natural systems is really the way to be. So it's amazing. So when we do talk about hydration, what does it really mean to be truly hydrated? And I know for you, it's not about, drinking X amount of glasses of water a day. And how can we optimize our bodies? Because that's a second component to being truly hydrated. And on top of that, what are the best water resources? I know you have some beautiful resources on your website. And what's the best water that we could be drinking for ourselves right now?
Beautiful. Okay, I feel like that's like 4 questions. I want to try to concisely. No, it's good. It's good. They all weave together. It's perfect. So I think, to start with hydration, like I think most of us sort of think of hydration as being how much water we drink, right? But drinking water is just irrigation, and we can irrigate all day long, but if our body doesn't absorb that water and convert it into crystalline bio water, then that's not actually hydrating us. So hydration is actually a matter of how much we absorb, and that's dependent on just a whole range of lifestyle factors and psychosomatic, psychological factors that actually have very little to do with drinking water and have a lot more to do with electrical conductivity. So this is something we go over a lot in my new e-course that's coming up. We go really in depth over all of the reasons why you can actually substitute the word hydration with the word electrical conductivity. Because we're way more so electromagnetic beings than we are biochemical beings. And all of the energetic impulses that keep us vibrant and keep us alive, they're all conducted by this crystalline water in our bodies. So when water is coherent, and it has that quantum coherence property, it conducts all of the signals of life really beautifully. But when water is incoherent, if it's lost its structure over time because of aging and inflammation and toxicity and stagnation and EMF exposure, and also, diet, of course, plays a big role too. I would say those are the 5 biggest factors that actually dehydrate people. It's not because you're not drinking enough water. It's probably because of inflammation, toxicity, stagnation, diet, EMF exposure. Then our bodies can't conduct electrical signals. And that's the spark of life in our bodies. So we really have to start taking hydration more seriously because, as I said before, of course, we're 70% water volumetrically. Actually, when you're first born, you're about 90% water. But then by the time you're elderly, you're about 50% water. So, and the structure of that, it's not just that there's less water by the time we're elderly, it's also the structure of that water significantly degrades over time. So when you're first born, you're 90% water volumetrically, and 100% of that water is highly, highly structured. But then that just really decreases over time. So there are several factors that play into this. And there are just so many doctors and researchers who have come out saying that aging really is just a process of drying out. And every age-related phenomenon, from wrinkles to edema to lethargy to stiffness, all of this to, mental decline, all of it is directly related back to this gradual drying and this gradual destructuring. So, again, that's all volumetrically. Volumetrically, adults are around 70%, but molecularly, again, we're over 99.9% water molecules. I've heard 99.92, 99.95. These numbers you can't exactly specifically quantify, but it's the vast majority. For every 1,000 molecules in your body, 999 of them are water. So hydration is really a matter of again, how much water is in your body, which I think is what we all assume, but more so it's about the state or the phase of the water, because if you're full of water but it's unstructured, then you're actually still not hydrated because the body can't use that water. It can't get it into the cells. And again, your hydration is directly correlated with your life force, because your water is the way that your body conducts prana or mana or chi or energy, electrical signals, magnetic signals. Our electrical signals are our thoughts, and our magnetic signals are our emotions. And so when your body water is incoherent, even your thoughts and emotions become incoherent. So it's the superconductor of chi. There's a biophysicist, Dr. Mae Wan Ho, who says that structured water fits every definition of a superconductor, every definition in physics of a superconductor of chi. And it's what enables us to be powerful healers or powerful manifestors. It's really the key to the power of manifestation. It's the key to the mind-body-spirit connection. Even Dr. Zach Bush, whose work I just love, he said,
Oh, I love his work too.
He's amazing,
so
right?
Good.
He said, you cannot have a spiritual experience without water. You can't have spiritual awareness of your identity if you're dehydrated. And to some extent, we are all in this modern world, we're all dehydrated. Nearly 100% of the population suffers from what they call UCD, unintentional chronic dehydration. So we're all striving for this spiritual awareness of our true self and our true identity of oneness, but you really can't fully tap into that if the liquid source of life, and is not optimized within you. So water is really what ties the human to the heavenly. You know, it's the intermediary between the manifest and the unmanifest, and it does this largely by virtue of being a dipolar molecule. So again, when it's in a formation, it's a conductor and transducer of electromagnetism, not to mention, of course, being the only way that your body conducts hormones and nutrients and all of these physical components as well. That one's obvious. You know, there's not a single thing your body does that doesn't involve water. Like, you know, your cells only function because they fold proteins, right? Well, every single protein is surrounded by 10,000 water molecules. And it's actually the shifting of phases between bulk and structured water that allows proteins to relax, or then gives them this backbone that makes them stand up straight again. So all protein folding only happens because it's surrounded by 10,000 water molecules. And yet the Western allopathic model, you know, if proteins are misfiring or misfunctioning, they're going to look at the protein itself. Even if you look in a medical textbook, you'll see drawings of the protein itself. You're not going to see drawings of the 10,000 water molecules surrounding it, even though its whole function is mediated by that water, you know, or your nervous system.
Even studying science as I did in the past, we never learned about this. We just looked at the protein, as you were saying.
Absolutely. And that's true even of doctors, sadly, physicians, like scientists, you know, everyone. We're focusing on the one molecule out of 1,000 instead of the 999 that are water. And this is really the power of true hydration. This is the power of true intracellular hydration, to get back to your question. Like, you know, there have been physicians and clinicians who have implemented really broad scope hydration protocols with their patients. And I mean, like, deep hydration, like, you know, diet, lifestyle, all of these factors that affect hydration. And of course, the quality and the quantity of water you drink as well. And they see just absolutely incredible, just miraculous results with such a wide variety of ailments that it's mind-blowing. You know, water is the single unifying thread across all bodies, across all types of medicine, across all states of health and disease. You know, if you look at the intracellular fluid of someone who has cancer and the intracellular fluid of someone who has AIDS, you know, even though technically those are different diagnoses, the cytoplasm, the intracellular fluid, is degraded in just about the same way for nearly every disease state. So some of the healings that happen when people get hydrated, like super hydrated with a really high phase angle around 10 or 12, there's nothing like it. It's nothing short of miraculous, you know? And a phase angle is basically a measure of your intracellular hydration. And again, it's because of this electrical conductivity. So phase angle tests, they basically pass an electrical current that measures how well your cell membranes can mediate electrical charge. And because your body functions on hydroelectric energy, it's the osmotic flow of water in and out of cells, and then the structure of the water within cells that gives cells their electrical charge. So phase angle basically just tests how electrically conductive it is, and that tells you how hydrated you are. And a phase angle of 10 or 12 is like perfect hydration, basically. Most people in the general populace have a phase angle of around like 7-ish. And then if you start looking at chronically ill people, like if you have cancer, for example, you have a phase angle of about 4.5 or below, which just shows, like, from a hydration standpoint, you're so dry that you're nearly dead. Water is life. And when we dry out, it manifests as various disease states, dependent, of course, on our, epigenetic factors and genetic factors and, things that are passed down through our lineage, how that dehydration will manifest as various states of disease. But we can trace everything back to the state of our body waters. And I'm sorry if it's getting a bit long-winded of a tangent. I think it's related to your question of like the primacy of hydration, because, we see the same thing mirrored in our beautiful planet, right? As above, so below. True. So of course there's this epidemic of dehydration, but that's concurrent with this massive worldwide drought and desertification. So, of course, the planet is going to be warming while all of our dehydrated bodies are experiencing more inflammation than ever before in history. Like, inflammation literally comes from the Latin to set on fire, to inflame. So without the cooling and quenching effects of hydration, both our bodies and the earth are inflamed, right? As within, so without. So our inner hydrology always mirrors our outer hydrology. The whole universe is holographic, and the means and the matrix and the method of this holographic mirroring is through water itself.
Yeah, it's so incredible to see how what is happening on a micro level is happening on a macro level. And you even talk about this when it comes to the idea of transference, and how like a amount of structured water being put into a larger source of water can really affect all of the water that's in that larger body of water. And it's that idea of what we're doing and how we can truly hydrate our own selves within our own bodies, and how that can be transferred into just the macro scope of our planet, which is so incredible to see that balance and that connection that we truly do have with the earth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So to go on with this topic, I would love to dive in a little bit more into this idea of manifestation, and how manifestation can really be facilitated through the optimizing of water, because of it, just like you were just discussing, we really are energetic vibrational beings. So when we have the most optimized hydrated water, I do believe that we can be primed for manifestation. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, completely. Water is the locus of manifestation. It's the key to the whole biology of belief and the mind, body, spirit connection, and all of that. They say, what we do to our water, we do to ourselves. One of my indigenous water teachers said that, and it just stuck with me so deeply, because I see it mirrored on every level. When your bio water is coherent, it channels and focuses, again, the magnetic power of your emotions and the electrical power of your thoughts into more concentrated geometries, like literal little sacred geometries of fractal structure. And of course, we know that divinity expresses itself through sacred geometry, right? So when your body water resonates with coherence, it's the difference between like shining a laser beam of intention versus just a diffused light bulb of intention. So with lasers, the photons are all streaming coherently in the same direction. That's why they're able to penetrate so far. So it's going to reach like much, much farther. A really powerful laser beam can reach all the way out into outer space because the light is so coherent. And it's the same with you. Your intention will just reach farther into the ethers, because water's relationship with the quantum field is like a mirroring of body and soul. You have a body and you have a soul. Water is the body of the quantum field. And, I think by now, again, everyone is familiar with the crystallography images of Dr. Emoto, and I'm not going to go into right now, like some of the issues with his work. We could talk about that, but I do think it gives you a good idea to kind of conceptualize of how beautiful thoughts and emotions can create more order and structure in water crystals and within us. And again, like, I don't know, I don't want to overstate this phenomenon, because I think a lot of people do really overestimate its effects. Like, just putting love on your water bottle is going to make some effect, but it's not going to make that much effect. Prayer does make a huge difference, both to your drinking water and your body water. But, there's a reason why Buddhist monks spend literally decades chanting the same mantras, because that's how long it takes to really pattern your body water to be tuned to a very, very specific frequency, a very specific channel, because water is the most sensitive thing in the world. So it's constantly shifting phases. You can chant love over your water bottle for 5 minutes, but 15 minutes later, if you're in a bad mood, the water is going to pick that up and change its phase again. Like, it's constantly shifting. It's always in motion. But we can tune our body waters to a very specific fractal array of memory clusters with honed, consistent intention over time. And I feel like that's kind of straying into the area of woo a little bit. So I want to just explain how that works more in depth, because every cluster of water molecules functions as a memory cell. And each cluster is going to differ in size and in intricacy. And, they might have hundreds or even thousands of molecules, but most commonly they're in collections of like 3 to 60 molecules in varying patterns. And each cluster, like I said, is a memory cell because it has, now get this, at least a minimum, each memory cell has at least 440,000 distinct panels on it.
That's
like
incredible.
Each cluster of water molecules. And that's just, that number 440,000 comes from like the smallest unit that we can actually measure using like the most high powered electron microscopes. But if we had more advanced equipment, water is fractal. So if you could measure a layer deeper than that, you would see another layer of fractal panels. Like it's just, in my opinion, because of its fractal nature, it's just infinite how many distinct panels it has.
Wow.
But at least 440,000 is what we've measured for sure. And each of these panels, it's like the panel of an antenna or of a satellite. It can sense and store and amplify and transduce and transmit information, energy, vibration, and light. And, just like these crystalline water clusters, they're like little molecular icebergs of liquid crystals floating around in bulk liquids. So, if you put the word love on your water bottle, you might have a few more icebergs floating in the bulk liquid, like a few more little molecular, say little molecular.
Little molecular.
Little molecular. You might have more of these molecular clusters floating around in the water, but it's not like all of the water is automatically going to become crystalline, right? So it's just a matter of how many of these iceberg clusters and how big they are and how well formed they are that are floating in the bulk liquid. And of course, they become more dense and more sort of glacial as the water becomes more organized into its fourth phase. When that takes more energy input than just the word love. It's really energy, it's ambient energy, radiant energy that does structure water. So that's why mantras have such effects. That's why intentions have such effects. But it takes that energy that you pour into the mantra, the energy that you pour into the intention, that gives it this coherence in the water. So the frequencies that the water can conduct become more connected or more dispersed based on its phase. And if it's in phase, then those frequencies become more in phase with each other. They become more coherent. So like when light is shown through a prism, right, it becomes more ordered into the spectrum of color. And so when vibration is transmitted through the crystalline phase of water, it becomes more ordered. Now, here's the part that's really amazing. Like, okay, so you have these little clusters of memory cells, right? They're like these little crystals, right? So what do we use in watches and computers? We use quartz crystals, right? Because they can, again, like sense, store, amplify, transduce, and transmit these different energies. Well, if you consider the way that a computer memory works compared to crystalline water, the two are super similar, but computer memory is basically like quartz crystal silicon molecules that are arrayed in 3 dimensions, and each atom is only capable of 2 configurations. That's why computers are binary, right? They have ones and zeros. Like these configurations of each atom is either capable of a 1 or a 0, an on or an off. And because of that, like computers can store a lot of information. But if you think of the crystalline form of water, the oxygen and hydrogen are organized, again, in these 3-dimensional honeycomb sheets that are super flexible. And the oxygens, like the hydrogens are bouncing around, but the oxygens are pretty stable in the matrix. They're arrayed at these fixed points. And do you think they have 2 states like silicon does? They actually have 6. They have 6 states. It's incredible. So they're
Wow.
called valence or oxidation states. So oxygen has like -2 and -1 and 0 and +1 and 2. So there's 6 different states. And just returning to the computer analogy, like if you had 6 states of silicon rather than 2, it would be an increase in information density that is like it's staggering. It's something close to like 1 billion times
Oh
the
my
information density compared to computer in every single molecule of water. So
Wow.
water molecules are like 1 billion times more intelligent than the world's most advanced nanocomputer ever. And this is how water is the mother and the matrix of this whole holographic simulation of reality. This is
Yeah.
how
It's like
life
infinite
exists on
intelligence.
every phase. Infinite intelligence,
Yeah.
infinite memory. Water remembers everything in all of history, in all dimensions. Like water, because it is the body of the quantum field, and the quantum field is itself timeless and spaceless. Water has access to all information throughout all of space and all of time. Like Dr. Rustin Roy calls it the world's single most malleable computer. And like your body is made of this. It's incredible. It's like mind
It's
blowing,
so
right?
magical
And this is,
on
I
so
think,
many levels.
oh yeah, it's pure magic. There's one of
Yeah.
my favorite quotes about water of all time is, if there's magic on this planet, it's contained in water. And it's just so true. Like even after 11 years, I still learn new things about water every single day, and it still continues to blow my mind every single day. And I think it's so important because it's not just esoteric theory. It's not just like scientific intellectual gymnastics. It's like we only experience the world as a reflection of our own inner waters. So the state of our waters determines the state of our consciousness. What could be more important than that? Like if there's chaos at a molecular level, there's going to be chaos in our hearts and minds. If there's chaos, we're literally incapable of coherence in our hearts and minds if our waters are incoherent. So I think that's really what spiritual awakening is, it's tuning to the higher frequencies of vibration in a consistent and coherent way. Like even if you look at the term enlightenment, it's about opening up to receive and to integrate more light. And we do this through our body water that conducts the light. Like it's literally water conducting light that's transmitted by our DNA. That is what communicates your cells for them to act. Like one of my favorite physicists, I think I mentioned her before, Dr. May Wan Ho, she did some amazing work on the relationship between water and light. And this is where it gets really interesting. Just here, right, is where it gets really interesting.
I was like, there's a lot already.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm going on a tangent
No,
here.
I'm obsessed with it. I've already watched your one of your courses like 2 times in one night, and I still am finding new information, and I'm just like, how is there more? So I'm loving it.
Oh, beautiful. I'm so glad to hear that. And I don't even get into some of this like more esoteric, fun, spiritual stuff in my courses yet. I'm going to do courses on that in the future. Like right now, it's all just like really practical stuff. And this is kind of practical, but I figured it was stuff that your audience would be more interested in than just like drink 8 glasses kind of thing. Like it's molecules. We talk about water as just, hydrogen and oxygen, but because those ions have electric charges, because they form dipoles, and because it's never inert, like even if water looks like it's still, its ions are always dynamic, they're always rotating and vibrating. And because its clusters emit these frequencies, the coherence of those frequencies shift so much depending on their size and their structures. Like different structures of water clusters, different electromagnetic frequencies produced. So water can resonate at pretty much any frequency, but to do that, again, it has to absorb these ambient electromagnetic radiation and then re-emit that radiation. To re-emit that radiation is it's literally radiating light. So sunlight, starlight, moonlight, they actually activate oxygen's outer electrons to these higher energy levels. I mean, really all light does to some extent. Near infrared light does so really well. Sadly, electromagnetic frequencies do so as well, and they fuck with water really badly. But just speaking on like a healing level here, like sunlight, starlight, and moonlight, again, activate outer electrons of the oxygen. So then within, get this, within like a picosecond, literally, I think a picosecond is a millionth of a second.
Yeah.
I think, or a billionth. I think a picosecond is a millionth of a second, but within a picosecond, so it's activated by this light, right? And then within a picosecond, it returns again it returns the charge to ground level. So this is just this epically, quantumly instantaneous process. And when it returns to that ground level, it emits all of those photons that it received. Now get this. This part is crazy.
Okay.
So it emits those photons with a frequency, and I'm not exaggerating. It sounds like I'm making up this number, but it's a real number. It emits those photons with a frequency of 1 quadrillion hertz.
What?
1 quadrillion hertz. So just to put that in perspective, like the highest things that have ever been tested on a Rife machine to see like how many hertz they vibrate is, I think Rose is one of the highest frequency vibrating things. Gold is another super high frequency vibrating things. And I think those are around 500 hertz. I want to say, I might be getting that wrong. Something in me wants to say it's like 350 hertz, but it might be around 500 hertz. But anyway, water emits these photons at 1 quadrillion hertz.
And that's when it's taking in the sunlight or the moonlight or the starlight.
Well, it's constantly in this process.
Yeah.
It's constantly in the process of absorbing signals and then re-emitting those signals, right? So like sunlight, starlight, moonlight are just examples. Such a high frequency and so instantaneously. Wow. So this is why Victor Schauberger said that there's more energy in every drop of water than in any power station on the planet. Wow. You know, this is why water...
Love it. Because I wanted to get into Victor next. So I'm so happy that you're talking about him.
Yeah. I mean, water is a source of free energy, 100%. Yes. It's not only a possible source of free energy that we can tap into our technologies, but it is already the source of free energy that nature uses, because water is this repository of pure energy. Like, yeah, it constantly blows my mind. And actually, so it's hypothesized that water is, I forget the exact number, but basically, I think it's like something close to, 900 and something billion, 900 and something million photons to every 1 part matter. So the 1 part matter is the hydrogen and oxygen, right?
Wow.
And then 900 and something billion. So basically a trillion. So there's almost 1,000 times a billion parts photon for every 1 part matter. So there's like 1 trillion parts light for every 1 part hydrogen and oxygen. So when the religious masters, the spiritual masters say you are light, what they mean without realizing it is they're talking about the fact that you're 99.95% water molecules, and each one of those molecules is only 1 trillionth matter, and the rest pure light, pure photons.
Wow.
Right? A photon is a boson, and bosons are basically the glue that hold all matter together. They're the way that the quantum field manifests into physicality, right? So, you know, of course, from here there's like a million rabbit holes that we could go down. Like, water is the basis
different
of
dimensions and all. Going more into Victor Schauberger's work. Mm-hmm. So he was discovering all of this. I would love for you to just describe some of the principles and some of the inspiration that you got from his work, because I know I've started to dive into his work now and it's blowing my mind again. So I'd love to just speak a little bit on it, and then I want to get into some other really important topics as well.
Awesome. Schauberger is epic. Like even well over 100 years ago, you know, he knew more about water than any modern hydrologist knows today. And what's interesting, you know, because water is always reflecting us back to ourselves, and how we treat water is our ultimate destiny. You know, he saw the direction that humanity was headed even way back then, and he wrote really explicit warnings detailing exactly where we would end up if we didn't change our relationship to water. And it's exactly where we found ourselves. We didn't change our relationship to water. So now we have massive worldwide drought and climate change and just general global madness and ignorance and mayhem. And, you know, if you recognize that water is the blood of the earth and the physical body of consciousness itself, then you see that what we do to water is what we do to ourselves on a micro and a macro scale, you know? So just, you know, from the cell bodies of water to human bodies of water to bioregion bodies of water, it's all one body of water. It's all coherent. Water itself isn't conscious of being, you know, a lake and a river and your body. It's all one body of water, just like you're not conscious of being a brain cell over here and a spleen over here and a foot over here. No, you're a coherent organism, and water is a coherent organism. And so what we do to one body of water, we do to all bodies of water. And this is largely why we've caused such massive climate change, and Schauberger predicted it. So I think it's really important to recognize the role that water plays in climate change, because as long as we're focusing on the carbon, we're just going to be chasing our own tails, right? It's like a chicken and the egg scenario. Like, which came first, the carbon or the drought? And we've been assuming that carbon came first. But carbon only becomes a problem when there isn't enough water to mediate solar energy, when water tables have been lowered and lands have been dehydrated. And the truth is that throwing the hydrological cycles out of whack around the world is what has caused climate change, the climate to change like far more quickly than carbon emissions alone have. Because healthy hydrated ecosystems actually pull carbon from the air. It's called soil sequestration. But when the land is thirsty, when it heats up, it lets the temperatures rise, and then it lets all these gases out into the atmosphere. And when you have anything that's too hot, you know, the first thing you do is you put water on it, of course. Now, carbon mediates less than 5% of the total energy in the atmosphere. The other 95% of the energy in the atmosphere is governed by the Earth's hydrology.
Wow.
Like, just take plants. Like, plants sweat, right? It's called transpiration. For every gram of water that a plant sweats, it reduces atmospheric heat by 600 calories. So just like for your body to be healthy, you need to have well-hydrated blood and lymph and cerebral spinal fluid and amniotic fluid and synovial fluid and all of that. Your body is more than 70% water. The Earth's body is more than 70% water. So just like water needs to be the first thing that we look at with our own health, water needs to be the first thing that we look at when the Earth falls ill as well, because CO2 is not going to kill us, right? It's the effect that CO2 has on water that's dangerous. Like, rising sea levels and floods and hurricanes. It's water that gives life and water that takes life away, and depletion of hydrology that's caused the CO2 imbalance. And what's crazy to me is, like, the bottled water industry alone makes about $100 billion annually, but it would only take about $15 billion to solve the world water crisis. And if we solve the water crisis, de facto, we solve the climate crisis, like, period. But water's just been ignored in the climate debate. Like, just like the primary role of hydration has been ignored in Western medicine. So we really have to flip the script. And that's why I think Schauberger's work was massively foreshadowing.
Yeah, he was tapping into something that was this foreshadowing. And I love how you're talking about how we're really looking at the wrong part of the problem, right? When it comes to climate change and everything that's going on a global scale. And this leads us into what is the global water cartel, that's the first time I've ever heard of it, when I heard it through your work. And it's something that definitely feels like a small percentage of the world that owns the water sources kind of know all of this. Is that kind of how it shaped? And I would love to discuss more about why it's so important to know about these things, and to really just change our narrative and our understanding of all these things like climate change, droughts, and desertification.
Yes, I am so glad you answered, or that you asked this question, because I think this is maybe the most important conversation we can be having about water. It's so important for each one of us to get really, really actively involved with water activism and water guardianship. If we value life, this is where our energy needs to be going, because Okay, where to start?
I know.
Okay, so I think it's such a big topic. We could do a whole podcast just on
We
this.
could do a whole podcast, and it is
I-
so important. So I wanted to really touch upon this in this episode.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. So I think a good place to start would just be to kind of set the stage for people. Because like you said in the very beginning of the episode, you know, in the Western world and in our privileged lifestyles, we tend to kind of live disconnected from the awareness of like, what is the state of water? You know, especially in the first world, we don't recognize that there is currently a global water apartheid between the global north and the global south. It's very real. You know, right now, 1 in every 3 human beings on the planet, 1 out of 3 has no clean drinking water. And by 2050, that's in only 29 years, it's estimated to be 1 in 2 people, half the population, without clean drinking water. And according to the WHO, 80% of disease worldwide is caused by unclean drinking water. Now, hopefully by now, like after everything, you can kind of see that like even the other 20% is also caused by the state of our internal waters. But just on a gross level, 80% of disease from unclean drinking water, and every 8 seconds, a child dies from drinking dirty water. Like since we started this podcast, I don't know what, like hundreds of children have died from dirty drinking water. And in the third world, literally 90% of their sewage just goes straight into local streams and rivers and coastal waters. In China, 80% of the rivers are so degraded that there's no fish in them anymore. Like 80%. It's dismal. It's dismal. Not to mention, so that's just the pollution aspect. But when we're talking about the desertification aspect, every year, a new desert the size of Rhode Island is created in China. And drought-related sandstorms are like plaguing Asia. You know, California and Arizona have already run out of water. They import all the water that they need. New Mexico's going to run out of water in about 4 years. Like all over the world, this kind of shit is happening. The planet is so dehydrated, just like we are. You know, drought and desertification are just taking over. They are literally killing and inflaming our Mother Earth. And so we have to ask ourselves, why? How did it get to this point? How? Because this wasn't the case, you know, 100, 200 years ago. And it's really, and even 40 years ago, you know, we've just seen a massive skyrocketing exponential increase since water started being privatized, because, you know, it's really despicable. But the simplest answer to why water is in this state right now is because of supply and demand. It's because of capitalism, because in a capitalist paradigm, you know, if the source of life has been privatized as a source of profit, then the more scarce it becomes, the more wealthy its owners become. The more scarce life becomes, you know, the more scarce water becomes. Like it's unlike oil. It's unlike anything else because it is the source of life. So if you control the source of life, you control the lives of all of those who need it every single day. It's the most powerful substance on earth. And the global water cartels recognize that water is power. In fact, even in Chinese, the symbol for the word water is the same as the symbol for control. And water is literally being used as a proactive weapon of war in many places in the world, especially in the Middle East. And even all over the global south, like poor countries have to export huge amounts of virtual water. Virtual water is the water that goes into like making something, but so they're not exporting necessarily their actual water, although that does happen a lot as well with diversions and rerouting and dams and all that kind of thing. But it's mostly the virtual water. So like, for example, 1 almond takes, I think something like 20 gallons of water for a single almond. So if you export that almond, you know, that water, you're basically exporting 20 gallons worth of water away from that watershed.
Right.
So these poor countries, they so desperately need the money because they've been forced, you know, usually blackmailed by economic hitmen in the World Bank and the IMF to pay off all of their debts through these monoculture crop exports, even if it means using all of their remaining water to do so, even if it means their own citizens have no water because they have to export this virtual water. You know, the World Bank is
so crazy,
a murderous bully.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it's because of consumer demands in first world countries like the US, because we can't live within our watersheds. We've decided we have to suck everywhere else dry instead. And that's why really watershed discipleship and living within the limits of our watershed is the most important step that we can begin taking, because otherwise we just unintentionally give all of this power away. You know, every time you buy a t-shirt made in China, you're buying a part of the Yangtze River. Every time you buy, you know, coffee from Colombia, you're buying a part of the Colombian river basins, and you're doing so via the mediators of this water cartel. They're the middlemen here. Suez, Veolia, Bechtel, RWE Thames, and all of their subsidiary companies. They've basically bought off all of the water in the world, and they literally write, this is how fucked up it is, like these private companies, for-profit companies, basically write the water policies at the UN and the World Bank and the IMF. Like they get whatever they want when it comes to
so
policy.
Like that's the only word to describe it.
It really is. And because of that, you know, the only people who have a right to water, the only people on earth who have a right to live, are the people who can afford to pay for water. That's where we're at with this.
And that is our life, water being our life, and we are water. We're basically paying for our life.
We are. And we're paying for it by stealing it from the lives of other people on the other side of the world. They're dying.
Yeah.
One child every 8 seconds, they're dying because the water in their watershed, their life source, is being exploited and privatized and outsourced.
Wow.
For us, largely. I mean, for those of us in the global north.
And it feels like the most important thing that we should be working towards and knowing. And it's so not discussed and so unknown.
Totally. Well, it has to be, right? For the current paradigm to sustain itself, for capitalism to sustain itself, for the patriarchy to sustain itself, for, energy companies like dirty coal and oil and nuclear and even solar and all of this crap that, even solar might be slightly more sustainable. You can debate that, but it's certainly not renewable. It's certainly not free energy. Like if you tap into the truth of water, that's why this information has been so suppressed, because it would radically shift absolutely everything. It is a source of free energy, and it is a renewable resource. The current hydrologists are taught that the amount of water that's here on the planet now is the same amount that's always been here. It's the same amount that will always be here. And that's a very limited understanding that keeps us in this state of scarcity. But Victor Schauberger discovered the means by which, like any living being, water can reproduce itself.
Wow.
And so, there's a very real reason why we all grow up thinking that water is just some inanimate liquid that just pours out of the tap, and that's it. If you look back at, throughout history, water wisdom keepers have been censored and persecuted. And you'll see like the first editions of books where they discuss some of their water findings, and then later editions of those books, those findings have been omitted.
Wow. And this is because this is the most revolutionary thing that we can understand on the planet.
Totally. And I while we're on the topic of the privatization, I know it's heartbreaking, and I really want to be able to give people some like concrete action steps that they can take, because like we have to get involved with this. We have to. It's not just enough to know it, and it's not just enough to share about it, and it's not just enough to post something on our Facebook feed, because it gives us this like false sense of engagement. But what it really takes is us actually showing up for water. So I want to give people some ideas of like different ways that they can take action on everything they're learning in this podcast. Because this is the deciding factor for all of future generations, like our generation now. Like this is the most important question of our lifetime, because there are already wars being fought over water.
Yeah.
Like one of the presidents of the World Bank, he said in the 20th century, the wars were fought over oil. In the 21st century, they will be fought over water. And that's already happening all over the world. So if we want a world without war, if we want future generations to have the right to live, like this is the question that we need to be super involved in. So I really recommend starting off by reading Maud Barlow's work. She wrote a number of amazing books about this, like Blue Future and Blue Gold. In fact, Blue Gold was actually made into a documentary. So if you, again, I don't think raising awareness is enough, but it is a good place to start if you want to like have movie night at your house, invite your friends and family over. Then you can watch Blue Gold or Last Call at the Oasis or The Big Thirst. I think that's a documentary. It's definitely a book. Anyway, there's a bunch of books on this, but start with Maud Barlow's work and get involved with your local watershed association. Really get to know your own watershed, because we can't protect what we don't know. And you might not even realize that even your own local municipal water is privatized by a subsidiary of one of these water cartel companies. And because most of them are based in the US and in Europe, like we have enormous power in the global north to be able to determine the future of these companies. And you can do that even just by getting involved in your local city hall and city council and saying, you know, we need to take back our water contracts and make them into public contracts again. I have a video on my YouTube channel that goes over 3 really great ways, that like really specific ways of like shifting, you know, working with your local city hall to like do public partnerships with water in third world countries and stuff like that. So there's some ideas there. And then there are some amazing nonprofits like the Water Keepers Alliance and the Blue Planet Project and the Earth Law Center. I think those are 3 of my absolute favorite right now in terms of water activism, really on an international level, especially the Blue Planet Project. Like they really get in there at the World Bank and at the IMF, and they're really trying to lobby for water's rights. And right now, I'm involved with a project that's called, we're basically calling for a world water law, which would set water as a unified global priority. Yeah. So, this year, 2021, is World Water Year, and we're really vying for a world water law. So you can find that at codes.earth/water law and help us to spread the word about that. But even more important than all of that, like I think the most important thing that we can do is really to restore the rights and the land and the power and the respect to Indigenous people, because they are the rightful stewards of the earth. They're the rightful stewards of water, and healing from capitalism really means decolonizing our minds, decolonizing our relationships, giving back what was stolen. Nothing stolen can flourish, right? So our land and our waters will never fully flourish until they're restored, right? Until there's justice and there's reconciliation and there's restoration. So getting involved with land back projects and projects like Survival International or whatever your local Indigenous activist groups are, I think that's really the most important thing we can do.
So beautiful. And that's something that we can all do, like you said, in a local sense. And that is so important to start there, because it's, doing those local initiatives that, over time, if everyone is doing that, it really transforms and compounds over the world. So that's so beautiful.
Totally. Yeah, we have to start on a local level.
It's so amazing. And then it also allows us to have that sacred intimacy with the water and people within our community and everything locally. So I think that's so beautiful. Even how we were discussing in the beginning, going to your local springs and being, just a reverence and showing reverence and beautiful connection to obtaining the spring water.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is a relationship. That's what it all comes down to. Like every one of us, whether we realize it or not, we're in relationship with water. And every thriving relationship takes time and care and attention and conscientiousness. You can't put your most sacred relationships with your husband or your sister or your best friends on the back burner and forget about them and treat them like inanimate objects. This is why, even though like excuse me, like you've taken my course, right? My first one, the one about drinking
Yes.
water. So,
Yes.
you know, like there are some really great structuring and remineralizing and energizing whole home water filters that I do recommend to people. You know, it's good to have that in your house to get off tap water or whatever. Like, but I also think that just the simple convenience of getting water from a tap is conducive to that objectification and to
Yep.
ignoring the sanctity of that relationship. So that's why in that course, I really teach people how they can, excuse me, how they can really like personally cultivate the practices and the habits around the processes of tending to their drinking water, like how to remineralize and structure and energize your water, even like personally and manually without one of those devices. Because, you
Yes.
know, when we take the time to really establish that communion without the immediate convenience, you know, without it necessarily being easy, but with it being this reciprocity and this dynamic relationship, you know, it takes time and attention to vortex your water, to structure your water. When you add hydrogen to your water and you watch the bubbles fizz up, or when you leave water in the care of the full moonlight overnight or whatever it is, like these are sort of like offerings of our time and attention. And I think the most important thing that we can do, just like you mentioned, when it comes to tending that relationship, really is to take that pilgrimage to the birthplace of our water, to recognize that our water doesn't come from a tap, it doesn't come from a bottle, it doesn't come from the municipal tap water supply, and it doesn't even naturally come up from a well. If we've artificially drilled down into an aquifer and we're pumping that water up, that's not the birthplace of water. That's like the C-section of water, right?
It's not
So
the natural progression
when
of what water wants to do, right? It's like always looking to
exactly.
nature to see how is nature already structured and created.
Yes, absolutely. Because water becomes our blood within 5 minutes of drinking it. So when it's gifted by the earth, when it's born from the earth in a natural way, it has very different properties, very different properties. So I really recommend that everyone go to findaspring.com, find their local spring. You can also try Gaia GPS or check your local geological surveys, or even just talk to the elders in your area to find out where the springs are, because you know, we're only 1 or 2 generations removed from this being a really common practice, right? I mean, imagine that, like for literally hundreds of thousands of years, we've been drinking spring water since even before we were Homo sapiens. This has been the preferred water source. And then within the space of just a couple of generations, most people are freaked out by the idea of drinking water from the ground. Like we've all become so domesticated and dependent on our zookeepers that like we don't even drink water from our own habitat. And I talk to people about drinking spring water and they're like, oh, is that safe? I don't know. Like, I'm sorry if that sounds judgmental, but like, it's just, I don't know. It's just how I see it. We have to take sovereignty over our own body waters.
Yep.
And again, the state of your water equates to the state of your consciousness. So even if it takes an hour or even 2 hours to get to your nearest spring, it is so worth doing once or twice a month. It's worth taking that pilgrimage, because it's a pilgrimage to sanctity. You're going to the source of life, and we can't keep relegating water to an afterthought. It is the priority if we want to thrive.
So beautiful. And I love that you answered my last question, which is if you have any water rituals, because that is a beautiful, profound water ritual. So I just love that you already did. You shared it with me. And people can find more information on your website, and you have some beautiful courses, and you have a new course coming out, correct?
Yes, I'm really excited about this one. It's coming out on the full moon. It's coming out on the 28th, and it's called Internal Oceans. It's a guardian's manual for human bodies of water. It's all about mapping the landscape of our inner hydrology and really exploring this mirroring that we touched on today, about how earthly hydrology mirrors bodily hydrology. And originally I created it with the idea that it would be for health coaches and nutritionists and naturopaths and medical professionals, but it's really for everyone who has a body of water. If you're interested in health, if you want to be as crystalline as possible, goes deeply into the biophysics. And then for the course that you took, the Navigating the Waters one, just so everyone knows, it's a little mini course about drinking water. And I would love to offer your listeners 20% off of that course if they want to use the coupon code Topanga Moon at checkout.
Oh,
They'll get
beautiful.
20% off. Yeah, and I hope they enjoy that and get super hydrated. It also includes a 50-page PDF resource guide that with lots of recommendations for different water tools as well.
That's so incredible and so generous. And it's already at such a beautiful price. So that's amazing. And I know that it's just such an important thing for all of us to know. So all the work that you're sharing and even all of your YouTube videos that you have out, there's so much information and you give so much beautiful guidance. So thank you for all of that. It's just so important. The work that you're doing is just incredible. I also love that you're putting your course out on the full moon because we always associate, the full moon and the changing of the tides. So that's such a beautiful connection.
Well, I was hoping to do it on the new moon, but everything ends up taking a little bit longer than you think it will with different projects.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it always comes out in the divine time as well. So
absolutely.
Beautiful. I love to end the podcast episodes with this fun, quick answer game that I call Cosmic Pings. So it's just kind of the first thing that comes to mind when I ask you some of these questions. Okay. So what is the most sacred place that you have traveled to?
Really, really tough one because there's so many. But the first ones that come to mind are either Tolantongo in Mexico, which is just incredible hot springs, or some of the water temples here in Bali.
Oh, yes. Bali is definitely some place that I want to go to, and also Mexico. So
come visit.
Yes, once we can start traveling again, because I love traveling. And I also did this incredible trip through the American Southwest, and we went to various different hot springs along the way, and it was so incredible to be in those environments. Your favorite crystal is
truly sacred springs there.
Oh yeah.
My favorite crystal is probably Vogel crystals.
Oh, I have never heard of those.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Check out Vogel. They're super rare to get an actual authentic one.
Okay.
Because they were developed by Dr. Marcel Vogel, who he actually developed. He was like the most amazing liquid crystallographer researcher ever. He developed the LCD screen, the liquid crystal display screen, and he developed that based on his understandings of liquid crystal water and how it transduces frequencies. So like your LCD screen transduces electrical frequencies into visual stimuli, right? Just like water transduces electrical frequencies into, all of the signals of life. And so he developed the Vogel crystal. And my husband actually had a genuine Vogel, like from Dr. Marcel Vogel, and they vibrate at the same frequency as pure water. And there's lots of knockoffs. They're okay. They're not made in the same way though. And it's the most powerful way ever developed of really focusing and channeling your intentions into water and amplifying the effects of water.
Wow. Okay, now I want one. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, they're super profound.
Amazing. Okay, so a book that really impacted you in your spiritual journey.
Oh my gosh. This might be the hardest question of the whole podcast. I'm such a book nerd. Okay, the first one that comes to mind. Okay, the first two that come to mind are The Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram. Ooh. I've read it 3 times. I'm sure I will read it over and over again. It's one of my favorite books in all time. Really anything by David Abram. Also anything by Daniel Odier, especially his book called Desire, I think, or his translation of the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. I think if I were stranded on a deserted island, those would probably be 3 of the 1,000 books that I would have to have.
Okay, I haven't heard of those, so I need to go now look those up because they sound incredible.
Yeah, check them out. Oh, although if people are looking for like water-related book recommendations, again, so many, but Dr. Carly Nuday has a brilliant one called Water Codes. I also recommend Universal Water if you're looking into more of the spiritual side of things, or if you are really just interested in drinking water, Dancing with Water by MJ Pengman.
Amazing. Beautiful. Sunset or sunrise?
Sunrise.
Yes. And I would say sunset.
Nice.
Incredible.
I think I'd say sunrise because it's my intention for 21 to start waking up earlier. So I'm hoping for that sunrise every day,
Yes.
even if I don't always make it.
Although I travel to Joshua Tree quite frequently, and I always wake up to the sunrise there, and I don't even have to try. It's so incredible. Yeah.
That's so beautiful there.
Yeah. It's so beautiful there. There's some really magical energy over there. But we can talk about that another day.
And where you are now, I'm sure that the sunsets are incredible up there where you are, coming at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes. They are pretty beautiful out here amongst all the snow. So, and I'm by all of these lakes. This area is known for lakes. So it's
beautiful.
Pretty magical to be connected and so close to water here. The cosmos
Lots of sacred spaces to visit.
Yeah.
The cosmos are aqueous.
Ooh.
Yeah. I think most people don't realize just how much water is in the universe. Like 70% of all of the condensed matter in our outer solar system is some form of water, some form of ice.
Yeah.
So we're basically swimming through an aqueous universe, and we think of it as empty space, but it's really not. It's very much liquid and fluid.
Wow. So beautiful. And finally, water is
life. It's easy.
Water is life.
And
so beautiful.
And my best friend and the ultimate mystery. And yeah.
Yeah. I'm just so grateful for everything that you do in your work and coming on to this podcast and having this conversation with me, because it is such an important topic for all of us to dive into and understand and start to come back to that remembrance of water being the lifeblood of our planet. So thank you so much. I'm going to link all of your website and all the resources that you mentioned today in the show notes. But just thank you so much for all of your knowledge and wisdom and taking the time to share this beautiful conversation with me.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed our chat, and thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been an honor. I'm so glad you reached out.
Yes.
I look forward to connecting with you more in the future.
Yes.
And definitely look forward to catching more of your podcast episodes. I was scrolling through them, and you've got some super juicy content.
Amazing. Yeah, I have a bunch of alien topics and all kinds of things on there. But it's been a really beautiful journey and some incredible guests. And I'm just, you've been one of my just favorite and most cherished guests. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Big hugs.